It's all right. It's all right. I feel that way too. We feel that way together, okay? Let it out.
Oh, hang on. I have to fix that. Did they? I hates the China. Now, you were at the Anthony Blinken's one of his last press conferences.
Yeah.
And so you got thrown out, and Sam Husseini, am I saying his last name right?
Yep.
So they've been wanting to ask questions about and get answers about what the United States is doing in Gaza, and they haven't been giving them. So in his last chance to ask the questions, they started asking. And they wouldn't stop. And so what did they do? They do just like we're told they do in Russia and China. They had the reporters thrown out. Imagine this. Imagine if this was happening in China, what the United States press would be saying. Here we go. Watch this. Oh, hang on. I have to fix that.
Two or three people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
Please respect the process.
Respect the process. Respect the process. While everybody from Amnesty International, to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal. Why aren't you in the Hague? Why aren't
So you got to respect the process of absolute censorship of any dissent to the point of removing you physically from the place where you're legally sanctioned to be. You can get virtually anyone to do virtually anything as long as they are armed and you call them a cop. Anyway, so he said, so that was Sam Husseini, who was trying to get Anthony Blinken to answer questions. No major U.S. news organization has reached out to him. I suspect they are desperate that the public not look at how murderous the United States government policy is or think about what journalism should be. And here you had a similar showdown at the same place, same press conference, and let's watch.
300 reporters in Gaza were on the receiving end of your bombs. Why did you keep the bombs flowing when we had a deal in May? We all knew we had a deal. Everyone in this room knows we had a deal, Tony, and you kept the bombs flowing. Why did you sacrifice the rules-based order on the mantle of your commitment to Zionism? Why did you allow my friends to be massacred? Why did you allow my friends' homes in Gaza to be destroyed when we had a deal in May? You helped destroy our religion, Judaism, by associating it with fascism. You waved the white flag before Netanyahu. You waved the white flag before Israeli fascism. Your father-in-law was an Israel lobbyist. Your grandfather was an Israel lobbyist. Are you compromised by Israel? Why did you allow the Holocaust of our time to happen? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? How does it feel to have your legacy be genocide? You too, Matt. You smirk through the whole thing every day. You smirk through genocide.
Thank you.
So Max, just tell people why you did that and whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's self-evident. And from the reaction I've been getting from around the world, I think people understand. Anyone who's been paying attention, who's been outraged by the policy and its results on the ground in Gaza, the bloody results, understands why I did it. And, to put it bluntly and maybe crudely, I did it for all the people who are silenced by the weapons my government sent Israel, especially the journalists in the Gaza Strip. And that's what I led my questions off with. The other reason I did it was that I've been attending these State Department briefings and respecting the process as Tony Blinken asked Sam Husseini to do. And Sam has been doing the same. And Sam Husseini, a lot of people don't know, he's been an institution in Washington, D.C. from well before online, well before there was like alternative online media. And he's been going to official briefings again and again. And he always would respect the process and be credentialed. And what had been happening at these State Department briefings is he was identified as a dissenter who had crossed too many lines in his questions and couldn't be managed, and it made it hard for them to control the message. And I too was, they didn't like me. We went, Sam and I, on October 12th, 5 days after October 7th, and started asking Matt Miller about Israel's just wholesale destruction of Gaza City. They were beginning to slaughter lots of children then. And I said to Miller, he didn't know who I was, so it was one of the few times he called on me. I said, they're saying they're going to commit genocide. I was quoting Israeli officials, one after another. They're saying they're going to commit genocide. Like, why are you letting this happen instead of working for a deal? And he just shut me down and lectured me and screamed at me that, Israel had been attacked by terrorists and they had the right to do whatever they wanted. So, but ever since those encounters, they would refuse to call on us, refuse to acknowledge our existence. It wasn't an open discussion in there. They have a whole mechanism for controlling the message in the briefing room, which I can explain. And then beyond that, Tony Blinken is someone who is singularly identified with what I consider to be the Holocaust of our time. He's someone who helped craft the policy. He was in the war room in the Israeli Defense Ministry days after October 7th, helping shape what Israel was doing. He made sure the bombs kept flowing. He even allowed Israel to keep aid out of the Gaza Strip, allowed them to attack humanitarian convoys. And all while pretending that he was fighting for a ceasefire, negotiating tirelessly. And we were told, like, Kamala wants a ceasefire. And Blinken was the one preventing it. And not just preventing a ceasefire, but he was preventing his own staff at the State Department from documenting the atrocities that were being carried out with U.S. weapons that you and I and everyone watching the show was paying for. So I don't think we've ever had a Secretary of State who was so directly involved in such a horrific human rights crime as Tony Blinken, while Joe Biden just admitted in an interview that in one of his first engagements with Netanyahu, Netanyahu told him he was going to do the equivalent of what America did to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Biden and Blinken proceeded to give Netanyahu the space to do that. I mean, that's like evidence for a Nuremberg trial. So I don't think the State Department as an institution is credible anymore or deserves respect. The process inside the briefing room was not credible either and was designed to prevent us from speaking or designed to prevent dissent. The State Department wasn't even hearing dissent from its own employees. And Tony Blinken, when he gives a press conference, they only call on the corporate hacks who you saw just sitting there passively while Sam was basically being strangled and dragged out. And so I decided that the only way to do this was to, break the fourth wall, like just get out there and ask all the questions that I've been replaying mentally in my mind again and again if I ever got in the room with this genocidal, dead-eyed monster, Tony Blinken. There were some questions I left out, but I was able to get them out for about a minute while a State Department staffer was escorting me out. I complied. And then after that, and this is really indicative of how the whole process was a giant fraud. Sam attempted to ask a question out of turn because he knew he wouldn't be called on. He was silenced, and then he stopped saying anything. And then Matthew Miller, the smirking press secretary, summoned those cops, and they just went in on him, right? They pounced on him right then and there. And that's when you saw that exchange that you played. So initially, he tried to ask a question, and for trying to ask a question, he got brutalized by cops. And it is not illegal in any way to interrupt a press briefing with a question.
And so, Anthony Blinken, now, why do you think he is so willing to allow that kind of genocide to happen?
Well, Blinken's a special figure. Biden considers him to be like a son-in-law. He came up on Biden's staff at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So Blinken had a lot of influence over Biden. He's not someone who was just following Biden's policy. It wasn't like Colin Powell in the Iraq War, where he was just kind of the good soldier and just went along with what Bush wanted him and the neocons wanted him to do until he realized that he was just like a dupe and they were kind of treating him like a house slave, and then he decided to rebel. This is Blinken's handiwork, like the horrors that we see every day in Gaza. And I tried to get at that in my questions. I think there is a personal ethno-religious component to this with Blinken. And I came at him as a Jew because I've decided to go a different way with my Judaism than he has. He's still attached to the Zionist project, and his father-in-law and his grandfather helped develop and support the Zionist project from within and without. I'm an anti-Zionist. And so this was very personal for me. And what I asked him was, are you compromised by Israel? Because in an AIPAC meeting in 2006, Tony Blinken said that 2007, Tony Blinken said that his commitment to Israel's strength came to him through his family and through his ancestry. So his father-in-law, who raised him from the age of 9 onwards and raised him in France, not in the US, the country he represents, but in France. Blinken's like a Frenchman. His father's in-law's named Samuel Pisar. He was the leader of the Jewish organizations, many of the powerful organizations in France. He was kind of like the Jewish whisperer to Prime Minister Francois Mitterrand, and a strong supporter of Israel. Probably actually more progressive than Tony Blinken in a lot of ways. Had been rescued from the death camps in Auschwitz by the Red Army, by the Soviet Red Army, something Tony Blinken will never admit today because he's a Russophobe. But Samuel Pisar was very close to someone named Robert Maxwell, who you probably know. Yes. He was a Mossad agent.
Yep.
And a prominent
Ghislaine Maxwell's father
figure who gave,
sired,
raised a young woman named Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. So, and Robert Maxwell was given basically a state funeral in Israel. The last person that Robert Maxwell called before he fell off his yacht under mysterious circumstances in the Mediterranean Sea was Tony Blinken's father-in-law, Samuel Pisar. Tony Blinken's grandfather, Maurice Blinken, was a Zionist lobbyist who helped support the production of the first study demonstrating the feasibility of colonizing the land of Palestine for an ethnically exclusive Jewish state. Read his New York Times obituary from, I think, 1986. It basically credits him with helping found the state of Israel. So you have someone coming into the top diplomatic position in the US who's that deeply connected to a foreign apartheid state that even before October 7th was carrying out hideous human rights crimes. And October 7th happens, and Blinken, his mortality and all of his personal identity issues just kick into high gear. And his instinct is just, we have to do whatever we can to support Israel because it could be destroyed and it'll be the Holocaust all over again. Give them the bombs, give them everything. This is not someone who should be a diplomat. Remember, the first trip he took to Israel was October 12th. And he said, this is one of the most shocking things of this war. He said, I'm here as a Jew.
Wow.
I've come to Israel as a Jew. I mean, can you imagine if there was a Muslim Secretary of State and there was a war between India and Pakistan and he went to Islamabad and said, I am here as a Muslim? That would have been disqualifying. So why is it allowed for the Secretary of State to be so partisan in a foreign conflict, but not partisan because he is a citizen of the other country, but because he shares the religion with the country's Herrenvolk majority. That's just to me so crazy. And so I asked him that, and it really like struck a chord. The Times of Israel said I was doing an anti-Semitic dog whistle, but it's not. It's just real. What it is Blinken is the embodiment of an anti-Semitic stereotype, and it's making people anti-Semitic to see what he's doing and to see him out there representing himself as a Jew when these fanatical Nazi-like Israeli soldiers are putting up giant menorahs in neighborhoods they destroy and reading, doing prayers with the Torah in homes of people that they've slaughtered and displaced. It's making people hate Jews all around the world. And so that's why I told him, as a Jew, you're destroying our religion. You may have fatally destroyed it. And so this was personal for me, and it's something that went beyond, just being a reporter in the briefing room.
I think that was a great angle. Now, I wanted to ask you more about, it's as creepy as Antony Blinken is, and, the way he says, please respect the process, it's just so creepy. What's even creepier to me is the people who pretend not to hear a word of what you're saying because they have the robot job of keeping everything together while the cops get you guys out of there. I mean, if there's anything lower than the person at the podium, it's the people blindly defending them just for money. Is that why those people don't stand up and say anything? Like, they know what's going on as much as you know what's going on. Why is it just you and Sam Husseini? Imagine if the whole, I think I said that on Twitter. Imagine if the whole room did that one by one by one. We might actually have some change in this country. But of course, they all kept their heads down and they want to be good boys and girls. Why is that?
I actually think, and I hadn't thought about this until recently, that the State Department press corps that's in there could have actually ended the war or contributed to the ending of the war by doing what you said. What they should have done is they should have organized and walked out and told kind of like a strike, and told the State Department that they wouldn't return until at the least they forced Israel to allow as many reporters as they wanted to go into the Gaza Strip to see what Israel was doing. Because that would have just forced the Western public to see the horrors day after day that we see on social media. Unfortunately, it would have also led to Israeli massacres of mainstream Western reporters, like they massacred the World Central Kitchen aid workers, which would have probably ended the war pretty quickly. They could have also just shown what a charade it was. But they're all just a bunch of careerists. I mean, except for there's a few exceptions. I mean, Saeed Arakat is one of the few Palestinian reporters in there, and he just said, I'm the only Palestinian in there. It's my obligation to keep asking them questions. So I get why he does it. But I was there at the press briefing the day before Tony Blinken came, and this is with the normal press secretary, Matthew Miller, who's just so condescending.
Well, he's constantly smiling.
He's smiling, insulting people who ask tough questions, cutting them off. He's just a condescending little punk. And it was so cathartic to be able to tell that to him to his face. But I just sit through the briefing the day before, and he was like celebrating. He actually said it was great that Syria was wiped off the map, like saying things that would have even been shocking from like a Bush administration official. He just openly, casually saying it. And the reporters just are, with a few exceptions, just humdrum about the whole thing. And one after another, if you go back and watch the briefing, one after another, they thanked him for his work over the past few years.
Christ.
And they each thanked him for their exchanges. And he was just so happy. He had this shit-eating grin, like, I really enjoyed our exchanges, and I know they've been tough. And it allows the illusion of democracy and this robust adversarial press to continue while the policy stays the same and goes unchallenged. And so, that also kind of drove me to do what I did, just the way that the press corps participates. I mean, fine, they have kids and they want to keep their, as George W. Bush said, you got to put food on your family. They wanted to keep them, they want to keep their careers. They have like they have a press room in the State Department that's like a newsroom. So like you feel like you're in your own newsroom, and the New York Times and all the Reuters, they all get their own cubicle, but it's the US government and the State Department that's providing them with those resources, providing them with hardwired internet. And then they build a relationship with the State Department staff. If you watch closely, right before I interrupted Tony Blinken, he actually said, I've gotten to know a lot of you all as friends. I know that might hurt your careers, but I really appreciate your friendship. And they would go to dinner at his house, or, Jose Andres, the restaurateur, who's basically like the de facto Biden White House culinary influencer who got all his staff killed in Gaza and still accepted a Medal of Freedom from Biden. Just such a dastardly move. He has all these restaurants in Washington. He like controls the restaurant industry, fine dining in Washington. And Blinken would go and like bring reporters to those great restaurants, and they'd all get treated really well. And they think Blinken's cool. These are like nerds, and they get to hang out with the Secretary of State, and he plays guitar and speaks French and gallivants around the globe. And that's the culture of the State Department press. They could have actually saved lives, but they chose to dine out with the Secretary of State and chose to advance their own careers.
Now, I wouldn't endorse Donald Trump, even though my big deal is anti-war, and he promised to end the Ukraine war, and he was the biggest non-interventionist president of my lifetime. But what I would say, and I'm happy to be proven correct, that if you vote for Harris, you know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to keep doing whatever Benjamin Netanyahu wants to until all the people are wiped out in Gaza. And but if you vote for Trump, there's at least hope, right? I don't have faith, but I have hope. And I even said that, I can't endorse him because of his rhetoric, because he's sounding like a crazy Zionist. But I was saying, there's a chance that what he's doing is being so over the top in his rhetoric that he's creating space for himself to come in and impose a deal. And he likes to impose deals and then take credit for them. And that's exactly, I cannot, I'm glad to pat myself on the back for it. And the reason why I tell people I got this right is because I'm the only fucking one who will. And so, but I did get this right. And how surprised were you that even before he took office, Trump got a peace deal done in Gaza? Did you expect it?
I wasn't surprised. Didn't expect it. I wasn't surprised because it wasn't going to happen under Biden. I can go into like the details, but just to be as basic as possible. Biden didn't ever exercise any leverage that the U.S. had, and the U.S. has all the leverage over Israel, and he wouldn't do it. And Netanyahu knew it. So whenever Biden would do something, it would be like to leak a statement calling Netanyahu an asshole to the international, to like the New York Times.
Yes.
But Biden couldn't even say that himself. Now he's like speaking out more. And Netanyahu also knew that like Tony Blinken wouldn't do it. That he just knew that he could get away with murder again and again. And he knew that they wanted him to attack Lebanon, destroy Hezbollah, destroy the Syrian government, allowing Al-Qaeda to rampage around the country, and to weaken Iran as much as possible. The U.S. saw him as an instrument of chaos and destruction to bring in what Condoleezza Rice back in 2006 called the birth pangs of a new Middle East, or like Katie Halper, I remember, had a joke at the time that it was actually the episiotomy of the new Middle East. And so it took Trump coming into office for this to happen for two basic reasons. One, Trump's unpredictable, and Netanyahu actually feared pissing him off. And Trump's, as reported in Haaretz, the Israeli paper, Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, actually screamed at Netanyahu and said, I'm not going to let you do Shabbat and ignore us. You're coming right now to negotiate this ceasefire deal. And Netanyahu did it. That's what should have been happening with the Biden administration, what could have been happening. Didn't. And the second reason is Netanyahu wanted to give Trump the win over Biden because he prefers Trump to Biden. He personally gets along with Trump. They have the same donor, Miriam Adelson. And he thinks that he can get things out of Trump that are top priorities for him in 2025 that don't have to do with Gaza, specifically the West Bank. He wants to ramp up colonization of the West Bank and crush resistance in the northern West Bank. And I think Trump will give that to him. Trump's people, like, look at his UN ambassador, Elise Stefanik. Just look at her Twitter feed. She's a member of Congress, and she doesn't even talk about her constituents. All she talks about is Israel. Her constituency is Israel. She is like the embodiment of Zionist-occupied government. She's the UN ambassador. Mike Huckabee is Trump's ambassador to Israel. He's a fanatical Christian Zionist who sees Jerusalem as the future landing pad for Jesus. And the ingathering of Jews to the land and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians is a necessary prerequisite for Jesus's return. He doesn't even believe there's a West Bank. He said that. So you have all these figures that really just ideologically believe in the settlement movement, the religious nationalist fanatics in Israel. And, Trump in some ways is a counterweight to their ambitions because I don't think he wants war with Iran. It would screw up a lot of his other plans. So we're going to see a ceasefire be signed on Monday, and there's 3 phases. The first phase is for a prisoner exchange and captives being exchanged. I think that'll go through. But then the second and third phases require Israeli troop withdrawals from Gaza and other painful moves Israel has to make. And the Trump administration's incoming national security director, Mike Waltz, has said that the Israelis have all the latitude they want to be able to go back into Gaza. And I think that the ceasefire could collapse in phase 2 and 3. So we'll have to wait and see, but it's definitely a positive development. And to have at least a ceasefire deal, the Biden administration didn't want it. And everyone who argued from the liberal left that Trump was absolutely going to be so much worse and make Gaza so much worse, they just look like complete idiots right now, to the point where they're just lying about what they said, like specifically Mehdi Hassan, just lying about their own record. And, I didn't fall for it. People who voted for Jill Stein as a protest, they didn't fall for it. And certainly Kamala deserved to lose for endorsing this policy.
100%. And that's what I was telling people. You have to make the Democrat Party and you have to make Kamala Harris pay a price for funding a genocide and not promising to end it. You have to make them pay a price. And you have to make, that was part of the intervention, the humanitarian intervention, sorry to interrupt, but at the State Department that we did, was ruining Blinken's last day is part of exacting a price so that they won't do this again, because it really does consolidate his legacy when he is portrayed as the Secretary of Genocide, correctly portrayed as that. Like, we consolidated his real role, and all the coverage of it around the world, but including on NPR, CNN, MSNBC, Reuters, the New York Post, all the coverage was Blinken interrupted. Blinken interrupted over the Gaza policy. There was no coverage of anything Blinken said. No one cared. So if you, you had a protest vote against Kamala Harris, I think that's, part of a righteous act of protest, and it's the only way we're going to get change on this policy. Well, I wanted to go over briefly how your interruption of Antony Blinken's final press conference, the Secretary of Genocide over Gaza, I wanted to just go over a little bit. So here's how CNN covered it. I don't know if you saw this, but this is amazing. Watch this.
As you heard, he was repeatedly interrupted by some cringeworthy heckling by activists.
You're cringe. So you think you and Sam are suddenly it's bad when they're against the activities you support. I mean, imagine when they did that to Trump, they loved it. Remember when Jim Acosta wouldn't put the microphone down? I mean, they used to love them, but now look how they try to control the meaning of the word and the narrative around it, right? All of a sudden being an activist is a bad thing. It's just amazing. Who do you think was going to speak out? It had to be somebody who was an activist. But anyway, there it is saying that she's upset. The CNN people are upset that you interrupted. God forbid you interrupt Antony Blinken. Here, let's listen to it again.
As you heard, he was repeatedly interrupted by some cringeworthy heckling by activists. I mean, we were both sitting here pretty stunned, frankly. This is supposed to be a press conference with a room of journalists. Those were activists who were interrupting the Secretary of State when he initially was thanking the press and talking about the Israeli-Hamas deal.
Yeah, I think it's really surprising. A lot of our viewers will have seen protests on Capitol Hill, for example, during confirmation hearings, but it's very rare for something like that to happen at the State Department. I'm over there all the time in that briefing room, and you need to have a reason to be at the State Department. You need to have an appointment. You need to have press accreditation to come and go. So it's unclear who those people were. So I think there's a real security question there. Allow me to be cheesy for a moment. This is a testament to American democracy and the way that American administrations approach their press rooms. They give accreditation to a wide number of journalists, and increasingly what I would call
this again. Imagine if this was happening at a Trump press conference. Imagine what these same pieces of garbage would be saying if this was a reporter have 3 cops pulling him out. If Trump was giving a press conference, you saw what they said when he was just rude to Jim Acosta.
Yeah,
this is a testament to our democracy. This guy's saying. Who is that guy, by the way?
Alex Marquardt, and he basically is telling us he's a State Department asset.
That's what he's saying. He's like, well, you good. He's the chief national security correspondent for CNN. When I go over to the State Department, you better watch your P's and Q's and do as they. That's what he's saying. He's supposed to be a journalist. He's supposed to do the exact opposite of that. You're supposed to be the one that they're supposed to be afraid of you. They're supposed to be afraid of the journalists, that you're going to expose them and their lies, not the other way around. He has it completely ass backwards, and of course he does. And that's why he works for CNN. Because if he thought like you did or Sam Husseini, he would never get hired by CNN. That's the reason why he got hired, because he thinks like that, right?
Yeah, and this is why everyone hates CNN, because they weren't shocked or stunned by what was happening in Gaza. They never had this reaction to the Holocaust of children that we just witnessed on air. They never had this reaction to these blow-dried hacks. They're just upset by activists. And me and Sam Husseini have more than 50 years of journalism under our belts. It's just not the kind that they like. So they call us opinion journalists and call us a security threat, like we're terrorists for being able to be in there. There's no red line with these people. There's no red line except when the president or his functionaries don't go far enough in the service of the military and financial elite. So the only time you'll see like reporters beat up on the president in the Rose Garden is when like it wasn't clear that Trump was going to bomb Syria after the staged Duma attack, or Jim Acosta. You brought up Jim Acosta because Trump wasn't fascist enough towards Russia.
That's right.
He was accusing him of being a Russian asset. I mean, and that's just like, how would any president accept that level of disrespect? And then he was just he was rude to Jim Acosta and called it fake news, which was great. One of the great moments of Trump's career. And all the reporters, I remember that day on Twitter, they were all like, we are under threat, and we're just here to support each other, and thank you for please defending us and defending a free press. Like a free press was under threat because the president called them fake. But now, look at how they react to Sam Husseini. He's an actual real reporter. He's done more, like 5 times more reporting and journalistic work than both of those hacks combined, and they denigrate him because he's speaking for the global majority.
I'm so glad you guys brought this up, because CNN is all over headlines right now about Jim Acosta's show is being moved to midnight, and they're outraged by that. They're outraged. They're like, that's so unfair to Jim Acosta. See what Trump's doing to him, and look what Anthony Blinken did to journalists.
I think there's a little bit more of this. Let me look.
Less mainstream journalists, more opinion journalists who have the opportunity.
So they called you you're not mainstream journalists. Yeah, I don't know if you know, it's over for you guys in your mainstream news, right? It's opinion journalists. Okay, hang on.
Opportunity to go to the State Department, to go to the White House, and to ask questions of the representatives of that administration. So I'm always amazed whenever I go to these different press rooms about who's actually sitting there. It's not just Americans; it's people from all over the world, from Turkey, from China, from South Korea, who get to ask questions of people like Matt Miller at the State Department or Karine Jean-Pierre at the White House. And so there's
he's saying this as they're running this B-roll. Of them doing this to a journalist. He's saying
being cheesy about our great democracy while a journalist is just being like, strangled.
It's like the equivalent of him saying this, and the B-roll was Julian Assange sitting in a prison cell. Yeah, it's the greatest. We're really the greatest. They let people from China ask questions.
Relatively open policy for now in these different press rooms.
Here's how Reuters covered it. Reuters said journalists berate Blinken over Gaza policy at his final press conference. How dare they? He looks like he's about to cry, though. Isn't that nice?
Yeah,
that is nice.
He has feelings.
He has been frequently heckled at appearances in Washington since the Gaza conflict began. Demonstrators camped outside his Virginia home for months and repeatedly threw red paint resembling blood on cars carrying Blinken and his family. Asked during the press conference if he would change anything about his dealings with Israel, Blinken said the Israeli government had carried out policies that were basically supported by an overwhelming majority of Israelis after the trauma of October 7th and said that had to be factored into the U.S. response. The Biden administration had been unable to reach final determinations on individual incidents that could constitute but listen to this is the Reuters mealy-mouthed wording. They're doing a genocide, slaughtering the majority of people killed in Gaza, women and children. And they they couldn't reach a final determination on the individual incidents that could constitute violations of international law. Why? Because Hamas has embedded itself within
Human
the civilian
shields.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out that in Israel itself, there are hundreds of cases that are being investigated, Blinken said. They have a process. They have procedures. They have a rule of law. That's the hallmark of any democracy. You mean the process of investigating their breaking of the rule of law? Okay, and here's
shocking.
My favorite is Blinken, who leaves office on Monday when the administration of President-elect Donald Trump takes over, calmly asked for quiet while he delivered his remarks and later took questions from reporters. He calmly did that. What's wrong with you guys? Here's my favorite is people like this guy, whoever this guy is, Jack Jaggerman. He says, this is not serious journalism. What you and Sam were doing is not serious journalism, Max. And no one but dumb kids and even dumber Marxists think you're doing a good, serious job. What do you say to that, Max?
I don't know. The president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, just reached out to me to congratulate me.
Okay.
So I guess that's a dumb kid in his view, or dumb Marxist in the view of Gabe Zickerman. The only negative stuff I've gotten, like negative feedback, is from crazy Zionists like Gabe Zickerman.
Yeah, he's a crazy Zionist, that's for sure.
So those are that's who Tony Blinken. That's his support base now.
And here, you mentioned this before. Dave DeCamp tweeted this out about the Times of Israel's coverage. They said that you were engaged in an anti-Semitic dog whistle by calling Blinken's grandfather an Israeli lobbyist. Really? So a Jew, which you are, you were engaging in anti-Semitic dog whistle just by saying that Anthony Blinken's grandfather was an Israeli lobbyist? Tell people who Anthony Blinken's grandfather was. I know you already did, but do it one more time.
Well, he founded the American Palestine Institute, which funded one of the first studies on the feasibility of Zionist colonization of Palestine, which would require kicking masses of indigenous Palestinians off their land by force in order to establish Jews-only settlements known as kibbutzim and Jews-only farming communities. And Maurice Blinken, you can see right there in this New York Times obituary, is credited with, through that report, helping convince the Truman administration to support the establishment of this ethnically exclusive Jewish state of Israel. Anthony Blinken has credited him for his own support for Israel. So this was completely legitimate. And I'm glad they attacked me for it, because it helps get the conversation to be more mainstream about how the hell this guy wound up as the top diplomat. Why is that legitimate? In fact, why is it a prerequisite that they have to be so deeply connected to a foreign country? So at the bottom, so this is his obituary, Anthony Blinken's grandfather, and at the very bottom it says, the Institute report is said to have helped persuade the United States government to support the establishment of the State of Israel. And that's the Institute report that he did, Maurice H. Blinken. So do you find that in the State Department or in that people who are Zionists and Jews in particular are overrepresented? Well, the funny thing is, I know some Jews in the State Department who disagree with the policy. It doesn't matter. I mean, the State Department itself was Tony Blinken. And at the same time, the political positions in the State Department, you cannot fill them unless you are a Zionist. You cannot be in them unless you're a Zionist, because of Congress, and Congress is controlled on this issue by AIPAC. And AIPAC is the chief arm of the Israel lobby, but it's not registered as a foreign agent or a foreign lobby. It's simply known in the US as a Jewish group. And that's their line to avoid being registered like every other foreign lobby is. And it allows them unlimited control, as well as the ability to possibly conduct espionage and spirit out classified documents from Congress to Israeli intelligence. I mean, we don't know about the full extent of AIPAC's activities, but we can see the results. Tony Blinken's confirmation hearings went through so smoothly, and look at who he is being succeeded by. Marco Rubio, who is an arch-Zionist, complete tool of AIPAC, whose career was supported by Zionist billionaire donors like Paul Singer. And he's sailing through Congress as well. He's like one of the only Trump picks that the Washington Post endorsed. Everybody in the Senate loves Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. And, today he was just ranting about how its government needed to be destroyed. So it's the political positions that are the issue. The policy on Gaza was Blinken, and then it was the National Security Council, Brett McGurk and Jake Sullivan, who are not Jewish, who set the policy, and Biden. Sullivan's Catholic. I think McGurk is Catholic as well. I'm not sure. And Biden is Catholic. And, my Irish friends consider him a complete traitor to their cause. But their careers have been supported by the Zionist lobby as well. And I remember back in 2016, actually, Jake Sullivan wrote the denunciation of me by Hillary Clinton when Hillary Clinton denounced me in public. It was he who did that, essentially calling me an anti-Semite. So, I mean, the Israel lobby just, it controls all political positions that require kind of confirmation or any vetting by Congress. And Jake Sullivan, what was he doing at the time when he denounced me in 2016? He was chief of staff for Hillary. So now he's like in like the deep state architecture of the national security complex. You never see him out there in public. But before, he was running a political campaign, one of the worst political campaigns in history. And he was
second to Kamala's.
I don't know. I actually think Hillary's was worse, but that's a separate debate.
Okay. Yeah, it's a toss-up.
And so he was afraid that there were these emails coming out where like my father had sent Hillary Clinton some articles that I had done like years before, and she would just say like, great job. You know, just like she didn't really care. She was just like, nice job or something like, you know, I'm glad, you know, I'm proud of your son, because they had been friends and, you know, worked together since the Clinton administration. And the emails came out not just through WikiLeaks, but through State Department emails that were FOIA'd. And so the Trump campaign ran this op funded by Sheldon Adelson to claim that I was Hillary Clinton's secret top Middle East advisor. And Hillary Clinton's top donor was another Zionist warlord named Haim Saban, who started freaking out about this. And so they had to denounce me. They didn't like, and Jake Sullivan. So my point is, Jake Sullivan denounced me just because he was afraid it was going to cost Hillary Clinton money. And when we talk about Haim Saban, this is a guy who funded the construction of the Democratic National Committee's headquarters in Virginia on the other side of the Potomac River. Like the whole headquarters was funded by one Zionist warlord, Haim Saban, who's an Israeli American. And he was asked by the New Yorker, like, why are you giving all this money to politics? And he just donated $1 million to Barack Obama. And he said, I'm a one issue guy and my issue is Israel. So that should tell you about why policy is the way it is.
Yeah. Well, great work. It is great that the way that his last press conference got reported was about what you did and what Sam did and not about what he had to say. And it is super creepy when he just, you could just call him a war criminal right to his face and say he's funding genocide. And he just says in a low voice, in a dulcet tone, please respect the process. It's like, it's so like out of some kind of a movie. It's just, it's like out of a movie. And he's the psycho guy who's out there committing genocide. Please respect the process. It's like, oh my God. I just can't, it just makes me, ugh.
It should be the title of a documentary about this whole saga. Respect the process.
Yeah, respect the process. All right. Well, I appreciate you making time for us. Great work. I salute you. And thanks for doing that. It gave me, not a lot of things to be happy about or cheer for. And that's one of the things that I'm really appreciative that you did, because I could cheer for it and it made me happy. It was great to see. And, a little bit, somebody got to stick their thumb in the eye of power a little bit. That was nice.
I mean, that's all we can do. I mean, nobody's getting punished.
No.
There's no one's getting held accountable. No one was held accountable for the foreclosure crisis, the Iraq war, all the wars that came after it. So we all just do what we can.
Nobody's being held accountable for the COVID policy, which we all realize now in retrospect was the opposite of science. The lockdowns, which crushed people economically, made people depressed, made children obese. The masking policy, which kids are now behind with their language development. There's no, the lie after lies that Fauci was allowed to tell. He lied to Congress twice about funding the research. There's no one's going to know that. And that's what we were talking about with Danny Haiphong. At least there's some accountability in China when people do that stuff. There's no accountability in the United States ever. There's no accountability. Nancy Pelosi's doing insider trading right in your face, outperforming the market right in your face over and over and over again. Nobody even brings up, maybe we should investigate this. It never even come up. We live in a completely corrupted society, and that's what I try to tell people. It's 100% corrupted, which is why nothing ever happens good for you. Which is why when the people's houses burn down, they send them $700, and then at the same week they'll send $6 billion to Ukraine. At the same,
and Israel,
and Israel. That's right.
It is unlimited to Israel. It's limited to Americans whose houses were burned down.
That's right.
I mean, we could rebuild so much in LA, in East Palestine, in Lahaina, by just redirecting the money away from Ukraine and Israel. But respect the process.
Respect the process. Imagine what we could have done. Now, we gave $300 billion to Ukraine. How many millions of dollars, not billions, how many millions of dollars would it have taken for California or Los Angeles to invest in, 200, 300, 500 fire trucks that could have been dispatched as soon as those winds kicked up? You just dispatch the trucks, and now they're waiting, and they're there. But that maybe cost, $10 million, maybe $100 million. We're sending $300 billion. So again, this is the way every empire ends. We're not investing in our own country, in our own people, in our own infrastructure, as we end limited cash for imperialism and war, and that's what this is. I'm not off on this, am I?
I'm not endorsing anything that, any violence, but you have to ask, everyone has to ask, why did Luigi Mangione become a folk hero? Or I totally disagree with I totally disagree with vigilantism, but you're just seeing people get turned into folk heroes who just strike out on their own and don't respect the process in a pretty dystopian way. And that's the fault of our elite. That's their fault, because they just refuse to they refuse to allow us to have a democracy to hold them accountable. Right. And they obviously don't hold each other accountable. They just reward each other, and then they launder our money in foreign countries that are carrying out devastating wars.
I love they say, Luigi Mangione, they say, well, violence isn't the answer to that. But violence is the answer in Ukraine, in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Iran, in Yemen, in Gaza, the West Bank. It's the answer in a lot of places.
Assassination is the answer. I mean, that's the way the U.S. and Israel react when a major resistance leader is assassinated, like Hassan Nasrallah. They support it. I mean, Israel does it. They blow up 7 apartment towers to kill him. And then the U.S. cheers it on. Biden, Kamala, they both issued statements endorsing his assassination. And then the chickens come home to roost and they freak out. I mean, they have legitimized assassination as a tool overseas.
100%. Yeah, of course they have. Yeah. Anyway, I could talk to you all day. Thanks for making time for us, and great work.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay, everybody check out the Gray Zone. All right, let's over to Steph to read some super chats.
Okay.
And we'll get Kurt back in here.
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you, Max. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. You should link up with Greg Manirino. Also, Real Estate Mindset. You guys would be able to make real impact on a team up. Terry.
You hook up with them.
Woo. Watch Ryan Grimm squirm like a little... Is that dog? Well, Max speaks truth to the power at Nader, who has it on the Clock app, NK. Hope you both enjoyed Hawaii. By the way, CNN found guilty today of defamation.
Yes.
$5 million payout. Not nearly enough. No kidding, low dog. Ben Affleck drone hit a Canadian water tanker. Also, he was complicit in spreading the fires to destroy evidence in his and J-Lo's court case. Unvaccinated guy. Hi, Betsy. Hi, Betsy.
Hi, baby.
SS. Thank you so much, SS. I worked in healthcare and went through the fitting procedure for N95. After 10 minutes, the seal becomes too painful to tolerate any longer. Autonaut. Thank you.
Isn't that something that Elon Musk got they reversed their decision on Dr. Drew because of Elon Musk?
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, that was wild.
I didn't wear a mask because it gave me bloody snot. Those masks make you prone to bacterial infection, which is why the bloody snot. I didn't get the vax either. Guess I'm evil in Fauci's world. Polly. Damage is the point, and there's a lot more where that came from. SS. Thank you, Fern. Much appreciated. My mom walloped me with a coat hanger, and then when I was born, she spanked me. Unvaccinated guy. Thank you, SS. Fauci lied under oath while questioned by Congress. Why is he not in jail, Alan? Because he's a part of the club. President Trump never wore a mask. B-man. Blank is still taking boosters. IHOP banned him from stealing boosters. Steets. The short Bastand is the bane of child seating apparatus. The short Bastange. I don't know what Bastange is. Bastange? Is the bane of child seating apparatus. Unvaccinated guy. Blank reported fiery burning sensation in his West Hollywood beehole, and they arrested Blank for egregious genital warts that tore a rut in his butt. Unvaccinated guy. Thank you. I removed the name so they could remain anonymous like their careers. SS. Thank you, SS. SS. Thank you, SS. Imagine the compliance. This is the kind of people or our culture has placed at the helm of the Sacred Heart of Healing. People who think like that. SS. Hey, Jimmy, you need to have some live streaming mods. Adventure. I was a tourist in China. I was all over China. Totally third world. Polly.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I've been using Red Note since...
They have high-speed rail. We don't have that.
They've got high-speed rail, Jimmy
What do
says.
you mean totally third world? That's a dumbass thing to say.
All right. I
went there too. It wasn't totally third world. That's insane. By the way, it's enormous. You know how big fucking China is? Very big.
I was using Red Note since December. The Chinese people have been so fucking nice to us. We have no idea what they're really like. My heart hurts thinking about the life we're missing out on. Pedro Mac. Thank you, Pedro. The amazing Blumpkin. I rode the metro in Moscow in 2019. Very clean. A lot of the stops are like palaces or museums. Beautiful. They mock Tucker over Russias for cheap food, but I'm sorry, this guy is an agent. How do you not see that? Watch ADV China. This guy is a meme. Some dude. It's interesting. The response. Did China get really, really, really better? And they're investing in the future? Oh my God. They're fixing it. All right. Thank you, dude.
Look, I'm not like, oh, China's good and we're bad. I don't subscribe to that at all. Just so you know, though, if you hate like woke, China hates that shit more than you. All the shit they do that I was told is bad has been done here 10 times over. You can't name a thing that they do over there. The only thing we don't do is when a billionaire runs their fucking mouth here and tries to affect your healthcare and tell you what kind of education you get, they send them away to a camp for a couple months. Don't make me love you, China.
Well, what is it YouTube sends us to? What is the camp?
Re-education.
We have to go to re-education anytime our videos are taken down. All right.
Okay.
All right. Let me just name these people. SS, thank you. Adventure in Modern Record. Thank you. Some dude, thank you very much. Some dude, thanks some more. Muchas gracias. And back to Jim.